I'd like to call the August 8th, 2022 Board of Commissioners work session to order. Tonight, for our Pledge of Allegiance, our engineer, Isaac Kessler, will lead us. Thank you, Isaac. Deanna, will you do the roll call?
Denise Hall, President.
Here?
Catherine Carter, Vice President.
Here.
Liz McNady, Commissioner.
Here.
Martha Similaro, Commissioner. Sandra Zadell, Township Manager.
Here.
Megan Weaver, Assistant Township Manager.
Here.
Lauren Gallagher, Township Solicitor.
Here.
Isaac Kessler, Township Engineer.
Here.
David Duffy, Chief of Police.
Here.
Nathan Crittenton, Finance Director.
Here.
And it is noted that Commissioner Ruth Damsker and Zoning Officer Van Reeker are absent.
Thank you, Deanna. We will be recognizing one of our public work employees, Cosmo Aversa, for 5 years of service at our next business meeting. Lauren, were there any executive sessions?
Yes, the board did meet earlier this evening to discuss matters of personnel, collective bargaining, and potential litigation.
Thank you, Lauren. Next, we have public comments. Thank you for respecting the 5-minute rule and practicing decorum. Our goal is to always give you the most complete and correct answers to your questions from our staff who are experts in each of their areas. For that reason, we have included a space for your name and email address in the registry if we need to reach out to you during the week with a full answer to your questions. At our last business meeting on July 19th, Linda Smith asked, since the proposed amendment to our TOD includes, as a requirement, being within 0.5 miles of a railroad station, does that then apply the ordinance to the North Wales train station and parcels around there? Does it include bus stops and bus routes? Our planner, Van Reeker, emailed her back on July 22nd with this response. Hi, Linda. Sandra forwarded your question of her to me for a response. The draft specifically refers to the Pembroke Rail Station. So no, it would not apply to North Wales Station. In addition, only vacant and undeveloped tracks would be eligible. I am not sure what you mean by bus stops and bus routes. Do not hesitate to contact me with additional questions. Thank you, Van Reeker. We had some residents who were concerned that if we answered any question offline, so to speak, then the residents who wanted to hear the answers publicly would be left out. So in the interest of transparency, we will continue to share any answers to questions that were posed publicly but answered completely privately at the following public meeting. First up this evening for public comment is Carl Smith of 815 McIntosh Way.
Carl Smith, 815 McIntosh Way. Repeatedly, when I've come up here to speak or before we've spoken, we've been admonished that you're not going to answer questions. So it's hard to understand what your protocol is when we have these meetings. It seems to me that when we have the meetings, I ask questions and, the transparency issue, you claim you have transparency, but it's inconsistent with your actions. What is consistent with your actions is the fact that you don't give us information that we're specifically asking for. You're very effective at stonewalling or obstructing the information that we're asking for. It's been happening with several issues, two primary issues that have hit my radar. One is the Martin land tract at the corner of Allentown and Broad Street, and the other is this Pembroke Station development. I've also been admonished by the solicitor of the township last meeting. I was told that the questions I was asking was inappropriate. I find that hard to understand. How does a citizen that's asking a question, how is that an inappropriate act? Because to me, if it's not a personal question I'm asking any one of you, I'm asking you something to do with township business that you preside over. So it might be an inconvenient question, and it might be maybe inappropriate for one of you to answer, but that's a discussion among you. That isn't for you to indict me as a citizen of the township telling me I'm inappropriate. Secondly, I've been told that these questions I ask are premature. And specifically about this development of Pembroke Station. They're not premature, given the information that's come to light in the last several days. It's possible that they're late. So it's clear to me how the Martin family, the owners of that tract of land, how they were victimized by this board. Because you operate in the shadows, you talk about the fact you're open and transparent, but you make decisions behind closed doors. You don't bring it to the public light until the 11th hour, and then you hoist it upon these poor people and the citizens, and they're blindsided. And then what happens is they lack the ability to mount a proper defense. It's not fair. People that talk about it, we talk about it among ourselves. We've got a term we use. It's called getting Martinized by this board. It's not a pleasant thing. So what we want to do is prevent you from doing that to us in the future, primarily with this tract of land that you're talking about. So we're not, as I said earlier, getting information from the board directly. We've gotten absolutely almost nothing of value from the board. We've gotten it through alternate resources. One resource that was unexpected was from Dan Sokol, a reporter for the Lansdale Reporter. Friday, he wrote an article on the front page. It says, Housing Action Plan Set. Well, in that article, he lays out exactly what's going on. Basically, the county seat is acting as a middleman between you, the Board of Commissioners of our township, and the federal government, which is bringing money from the government to us by using the Walters Group. The Walters Group is getting $1.3 million in that article, it's spelled out of a $4.25 million fund, I guess, that incentivizes high-density, income-restricted housing. That's what's going on. Kaylee Silver, the administrator of Housing and Community Development, she's quoted in that article as well. She says, funds specifically benefit persons of very low, and moderate income in the county. So that's the income-restricted, low-income piece. The 44 units that are being put on this property is the high density that you keep saying is not there. It is there. It's not same density, Denise. It's high density. So, answers? I don't know. I guess it's a matter of perception. We don't feel we're getting the answer. So I got two questions. If you're answering questions, let's see how this goes. So in the article, it talks about this project being named Cornerstone at Pembroke Station in Upper Gwynedd. The name Cornerstone is interesting to me. That indicates a building block, a fundamental component to building a building. It's the first thing you put in place. Is this the first thing that's being put in place? And do we have more of these building blocks to look forward to from this township? That's question one. Question two, did Upper Gwynedd Township endorse any grant application submitted to any funding source by the Walter Group? So I'm open to hearing those answers, unless you're in the not answering the questions mode.
Can you repeat the grant question? I just want to make sure I have all the
The Upper
wording.
Gwynedd Township leadership here endorse any grant application submitted to any funding source by the Walters Group. In other words, they need to get an application submitted to the federal government, and they need your cooperation to do it. That's what I'm asking. Did you cooperate in that effort?
So Carl, let me just clarify something. We have been trying to make the public comment section, as you've noticed, I'm sure, a little more structured, a little more efficient, to keep the meeting moving and flowing with our agenda. As well as we've really been trying to get complete and correct answers for anyone who asks a question from our staff, who are the experts. There are some questions that you can pose that maybe we can give you a direct, quick answer right away. There's more questions that we feel need a little bit more time and a little more expertise that maybe we don't have at the moment, a little more thinking through to make sure that we have the correct answer. I understand your concerns that you are making the questions publicly, and then you are not getting a public response, and you feel like that is not being transparent. So we are going to share those answers, even if they do get answered offline, so to speak, via a phone call, via an email. So you will know, so the public will have the opportunity to know exactly what the answer is. But in general, we've been trying to figure it out. And it is a process, and it's not perfect. We recognize that you have a lot of questions and you really want to ask these questions at this point of the meeting. Okay, fine. So if it is a simple question that we, like I said, we feel we can give you that direct, straight answer, that's a simply answered question, sure. But if we feel like really in good conscience, we need to put a little more into it, we're going to ask you just to wait a couple days. And then we're going to share it with everybody. Does that make sense?
It makes a little bit of sense, but I'm putting it in the perspective of your historical record of dealing with your citizens, like the Martin family. So I don't trust you. And a lot of people don't trust you because you've proven yourself not to be trustworthy in that effort. You're condemning a man's land. We haven't heard anything about it, by the way, from this board. So I'd like, you know, if you're in the question answering mode, let's hear about what's going on there. It's an affront to people's freedom and land ownership. It's unbelievable what you're doing.
Okay. Your 5 minutes,
Yeah, I know.
exceeded the 5 minutes. For both of these questions, can we get back to you with the answer? Are these both questions that could use a little bit of
I'm not sure
detail?
what the first question was exactly.
Okay.
Oh, if there was going to be more.
The name of the project is called the Cornerstone.
Yes, I wrote down.
That's a
cornerstone.
key word, cornerstone. What does that mean? That means something. I'm sure of it.
Okay.
I'm
I
sure
can-
we got more
I
of
can tell
this
you
to-
100% that the township has nothing to do with the name of the parcel or the development, and that we are not in control of which projects come towards us.
The township doesn't seem to be in control of anything, the way
Okay,
you
thank
present
you.
it.
Okay. Thank you, Carl. Linda Smith, also at 815 McIntosh Way.
Hi, thank you for that answer from Van. I did receive it, and I appreciate him getting back to
You
me.
didn't receive it?
I did receive it.
We did, sorry. Okay, great.
So we learned, we've now learned about, and the public should know about the project on Pembroke Parkway, that it's subsidized housing. Is that correct? According to that article out in the Reporter.
So this specific land development has not been, is not been given to the board as of yet. We have preliminarily, they've given us preliminary ideas, we have sketch plans, we're at the very introductory part. Until, in this part, in this phase, things change all the time. So for us to comment on any specific of that plan is just premature.
Well, I'm not asking for specifics. You must know if it's subsidized housing. I mean, that's pretty general. It's a general.
In general, we can't speak about anything with that plan, like I said, until we have the ordinance, until we have it more nailed down. And then we can answer more specific questions like that.
Okay, so when is that going to happen? When can we get more specifics?
It's really dependent on the developer and their timetable, but go ahead.
When and if it does come in front of the board, it'll be advertised, the property will be posted, and the public notice will be provided, and I'm sure that there'll be announcements at the board. It's not been scheduled for a public hearing yet. it's
So it
not
goes to the
coming.
planning commission first.
It goes to the planning commission. Typically, we have a community meeting before that even, when we have a new development for any neighbors who are concerned about a specific area or just want information. So that is something maybe that will happen. Again, we're very much in the preliminary.
Okay, thank you. So our assertion is that this is part of a national agenda. I mean, that this is what we're understanding. And let me tell you, I have to understand this because I'm starting this week. I'm going out. I'm knocking on doors. I'm introducing myself to the residents in Upper Gwynedd, and I have to tell them the facts. So I don't know if anyone in this room can tell me that this is good for the residents of Upper Gwynedd, subsidized housing, high-density housing. On page 32, and I keep referencing this, the 2040 comprehensive plan that you worked on, spent $100,000 at least on. I'm going to read a paragraph, and I'm speaking for the township residents here in this paragraph. They spoke to you. According to the comprehensive plan community survey, 97% of township residents who responded stated that they would rate the township as an excellent or good place to live. Neighborhood character is the #1 township characteristic that drew people to relocate in the township. In addition, over 79% of the survey respondents indicated that maintaining a safe, quiet, family-friendly neighborhood character was one of their top 3 priorities for their neighborhood. I can't see how high-density housing is going to sit with these residents. I haven't gone out, but I've spoken to Republican and Democrat. I've not seen anybody that thinks that this is a good idea for our township. This is not why they moved here. I also have concern with the affirmatively furthering fair housing. Are you familiar with that? It's actually it's the AFFH. It will federalize local control of our communities. It will, in fact, take away local control from local citizens and place it in the hands of bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. And these bureaucrats will then determine who should live where and what our community should look like. It'll include, but not limited to, rezoning single-family housing areas to include building high-density, income restricted apartments, which we're kind of doing. We're trying to change a light industrial to that. Transplanting people who live in urban areas out to the suburbs that will effectively morph into helpless satellites of the cities that they surround. In order for this Walters Group to move forward, they need a zoning change. Is that correct? For the Walters Group to move forward with this project, they need the light industrial zoning change to, I guess, residential. Is that what it will be changed to?
The draft ordinance is a draft proposed text amendment, and there's a corresponding map amendment that's been proposed.
Okay. So I'm just appealing to the voters of Upper Gwynedd Township, those here, those that are listening, that if the commissioners here approve this zoning change, it is a done deal. And we need to stop it before the zoning change is approved, or our township will not be the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Next up, we have Carolyn Powers of, 226 South 11th Street, sorry.
Good evening. This proposal, the zoning proposal, was just brought to my attention recently, and I'm actually very surprised to hear about it. And I was able to spend some time looking at your forecasted 2040 comprehensive plan. And I saw there's an estimated 479 new dwelling units planned for our township between now and 2040. It seems that you're following the DVR-PC stats for this prediction. Where are the future build sites?
Can you repeat your question?
Where are the future build sites for 470? And then I'll subtract the 44 for the Pembroke. No, it says it right here.
No, I'm sorry. Did you say 279 or did you say?
479 minus 44 for the Pembroke Station builds would then be 435
Okay.
dwellings.
so go
Where
ahead.
would that be? And I'm curious because we have
435 new sites.
dwellings
you're
that you have
saying,
predicted.
New dwellings.
Mhm.
And you would like to know where they're going to be?
Absolutely.
Okay. We will look it up in the comprehensive plan and we will get back to you.
I just have to say something. It's very interesting how you're not able to answer questions, yes or no. And I think all the answers should be in writing. I'm a teacher. I've been a teacher for 33 years in North Penn School District. And if I ran back to school night saying, let me look it up and find, I can't imagine. It's very disappointing for me right now to be a member. I've lived in Upper Gwynedd for 22 years, and I have had multiple parents, hundreds of parents who speak very highly of me throughout North Penn. You can check my record. And I can't imagine not being able to answer something so hot.
I don't have the entire.
It's such a hot topic.
Right. I don't
Like
have the entire.
how am I doing a reading program?
comprehensive-
How am I helping their child? Let me get back to you on that, Mr. and Mrs. Jones. I can't imagine. I have to say that. Thank you.
We will make sure that we get you an email because you said you wanted the answer in writing? Right, yes. Okay, great. Thank you, Carolyn. Next up, we have Karen Varilla of 214 South 11th Street.
Good evening. Karen Varillo, 214 South 11th Street, North Wales, Upper Gwynedd Township. So like Carolyn, I just learned about this proposal this weekend, and I am shocked to read this press release that says that this has been being reviewed for the last 12 months, yet you have no answers for us. It's been reviewed for 12 months, and $100,000 have gone into this planning, and why don't we have any answers? What is it why is this being hidden? And this survey that has gone out to the community. What survey? Do you understand? Do you know what I'm talking about? Like why this is coming to this township? Nobody has asked any of us, have they? Have you been asked? No. Why is that?
What survey?
Yeah, what survey are you
I don't know
referring
what
to?
press release you're talking about either.
The
The
comprehensive.
comprehensive plan survey was advertised in our newsletter, which gets mailed to all of your homes. It was on our website. You guys don't get the newsletter? Is that funny?
Is it only sent to Democrats?
Oh,
Because honestly, during COVID, 2 years ago.
actually, it wasn't. It was before COVID. It was several years ago, and I think, when did we, it was before I started working here that you guys started working on the comp plan, so it was in 2018, 2019.
So that raises another question. This was years ago. Why do we not have any answers right now, but what is coming to our township?
If I may,
Please.
and I'm talking to you just as if we were outside right now. What Carl said about Cornerstone, I haven't even heard that yet. That's news to me. I don't get the paper. That's news to me. And I swear to you that I have not seen what Mr. Borneman received today from the Right to Know. That's more information than I've ever seen. I had no idea that Green Lawn approached the township years ago. It's what I'm trying to say is it's a process that we go through with land development. I'm not involved in it because that's not my area right now. So I rely on our staff, Sandra, Megan, Van, to help us, even Isaac, our engineer. When they get proposals, we have these meetings called PRC, Plan Review Committees. And it's staff, and it's a courtesy type of a meeting from what I understand. They have been going on for years. Tom, I'm sorry, can you hear me all right? Yeah, can you hear me all right? Yeah. So how these meetings were explained to me years ago when I first got on the board, it's a courtesy that we offer people that are interested in building in the community. They come in and they present to Van, Sandra, Megan, the zoning liaison. It would be Ms. Stamsker now. Denise, you're there. Denise would be there. Who else am I missing?
Wastewater engineer.
Wastewater engineer, Isaac's there. And they come to us and they say, hey, we're looking to build, X, Y, and Z in your neighborhood, in your township.
Okay.
What do you think? They're the experts. They know more about this. They have the background, everything. They tell them, well, our zoning is this, wastewater would be this, engineering would be X, Y, and Z. And then at that point, they can say, well, do you think this is something that maybe the township would be interested in? At that point, the board that's not there, board members that aren't there, we know nothing about this. There's no notes taking. It's a courtesy that we give. Then at that point, the builder then, developer, then they decide how to move forward, what they want to do. And they talk to Van, and they'll talk to Megan, they'll talk to other people. With the Walters Group, I still don't have all the answers. I know they went from 60 down to 44. And from what I read, there was I think it said 4, and I was trying to find it, and maybe somebody that has this can explain this, can help me. I think they said they wanted 4 units to be affordable housing for people. I think it said 4 in there, but the rest would be, is that correct? I'm not sure. I'll look it
That's
up
not
before.
That's
It didn't
that's why
say
we're
4?
not, we shouldn't really be
Yeah.
talking much about it because it's
But it
very
did say
preliminary.
something, and it did say something in there, I remember. Now, again, I could be talking off, and this would not be what they wanted, but this is the information that's there, and it's a draft. It's not anything, I didn't get what Tom got, his right to know, until a couple hours ago and going through it, and I'll find it, because I did read something like that. But it's all a draft. It hasn't even been formally brought to
Okay,
any of
so
us yet.
we
And that's
have a
just
chance
the
to-
process that's been going on for years and years and years. And it hasn't changed with a new board or anything. And a new board comes in, it's still the same process. So I'm sorry, what did you want? ask?
I just wanted to, well, thank you for answering that, but are you telling us that there's still a chance that we can stop this from happening?
Yes,
That's what we've been
absolutely.
saying for months, that yes.
And you know what? There's a chance that I might vote against it too, because I don't know yet. I am learning with you.
Yeah.
And that's the God's honest truth. So
Okay.
you think this is planned and this is a done deal? I haven't heard it. I don't know how many others have heard the full thing yet. It's a draft.
No one has heard the full project, no one on this board, no member of township staff. Likely, the reporters have talked to the project individuals that are designing the project, and that's where they obtain some of their information. In order to build this project, there would have to be several approvals at several different publicly advertised meetings. It is so far from where we are right now. Right now, it's just a draft, and the developer hasn't indicated that they're even ready to come to the township yet. They're just,
So the point I
Designing.
would like to point out, like this article that was in the paper that is causing you to think it's a done deal. That's between the county and the local government. We're not the same. We're not the same organization. We're a completely different governmental unit. So if the county is giving grants to an applicant, yes, we might write a letter of support. In this case, we did not write a letter of support. I was not approached about any letters of support for the Walters Group application unless I'm totally flaking and forgot one, but I will check the record and get back to you. But those things that are going on with that project, with the county, with applying for grants, that has nothing to do with this board's approval, which are land development related. And if you stay for it at the manager's report, I have a whole presentation about the land development process that I think will help lay out the timeline. Additionally,
Does that mean that you're for it?
I don't vote for projects. I'm an administrator. I administer the township. I'm the boss of the employees. I'm the administrative liaison for the board. The board votes on policy and I run the township. So even if I was for or against, it doesn't matter. My opinion is not, I don't live here. It's not taken into account.
And the other thing I wanted to say about the survey that you were asking that was related to the comprehensive plan, like, we can't force people to take a survey. We extended it as long as we could. We sent out emails to everyone who gets our emails. We put it in our newsletter. We put it all over social media. We
on
talked
our
about it at
website.
public meetings. I mean, it started when Liz and I were in the minority on the board. It was a group effort by all five of us, but it was never a secret. I mean, we had 27 volunteers from the community that we were able to incorporate into working on it together. So it was far from a secret. We were ecstatic by when the numbers kept going up of how many people would respond, but we can't force people to respond to a survey.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for your answers. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Next up is Dan Wallace of 848 Girard Avenue.
Good evening. I want to switch to another important topic that's on the agenda for future health and safety of this community. I'd like to get an update from you on the status of the new fire hall. The fire station is outdated, as we heard from the chief and a few other officials, and I'd like to know, it's been about 6 months or so since I heard a presentation by Eric and the chief and the assistant chief. Is that somewhere in your agenda to take some further action on funding or site selection or anything? Because we're here for talking about a good community. Safe community is one of the most important things. We have a good police and we need a good fire. So I just.
And I could do a really quick.
Yeah, Dan, I can
You
provide an
have it now,
update.
or- Okay.
Oh, yeah, I can do it now. This
ahead.
one's easy. I
I'll
just
listen.
met about it this week. So the consultant that was chosen to go forward with is a free consultant through the state, through the Department of Community and Economic Development. They do police and fire studies. So the fire company is working directly with Robert Hedden. He's a person that works, he's a retired firefighter that works at DCED, and they've begun the study. So they were out for a site visit last week. I met with them, and they're moving forward. So the study is the first step in many steps towards the possible creation of a new firehouse.
Do you have any insight on funding?
So funding would come from probably multiple sources, but we haven't applied for any funding yet because this project is still on our 6-year plan.
Okay.
So we do have a capital plan, as you might recall from the budget last year. This project, I think, and this is why I hate having to answer on the fly, I think it's 2029 is when we're slated to.
I
because it
know
takes
it's
a lot of
several
time to
years
plan.
out, but,
Yes.
and I respect the folks that like the West Point Fire Station and the history of it, but it's time, and I've heard the chief say this, it's time to get in with the 2020s and the 2030s because they're having trouble getting firefighters and the facility is outdated. And I think it's important for the safety of the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. I mean, Dan, sorry. I was jumping up to Fred. Speaking of Fred, next up is Fred Hankin of 802 Clover Drive.
Fred Hinkin, 802 Clover Drive. So this project is so preliminary. Why is the Walters Group getting $1.3 million in grant money? Answer?
Again, I'll answer that, Fred. I have no idea why
reiterating
the
because I'm
applicant is
not sure.
applying to the county for funding when they don't have approval from the governing board yet,
Seems-
but
it
that's
seems a little
their
odd.
prerogative as a property owner
Mhm.
to do whatever they'd like with their property. And that's all I can say.
Sure, of course.
But it has nothing to do with the approvals that this board will render or not render.
Fair enough, thank you. And I want to get back to this important question too, because I keep hearing about the 2040 comprehensive plan. I've asked this question several times. Why did these commissioners not mail surveys to people to fill out? How many people in this room were getting website information from the township 3-4 years ago? Can't show of hands to anyone? Nobody was getting them. So you keep telling us that we told you. I didn't know about this either.
But it was in the newsletter that's mailed to every home.
No,
So
it-
it was mailed to your home.
Well, and
If you don't
show it-
receive your newsletter, please let me know. You can make
well,
a
it's a little
list.
late now, isn't it? So the show of
Well-
hands just showed that nobody read that saw that.
The
So
comprehensive plan is
excuse me,
a,
just a moment, and
is
then
a-
I'll.
hold on, the comprehensive plan is a planning document. That's not a guarantee of anything that's going to come into the
You're
township.
using it
It's
as a weapon.
planning- Their board is not using it as a weapon. It is a
Can I finish?
planning
Because you
document.
interrupted me. I don't interrupt you. Thank you. So I still don't understand why this wasn't mailed to residents. I mean, if you really want people's opinion, then you find a way to get it. And I worked in business for almost 40 years now. If I came back working on a project and did not have surveys that I needed, I would be asked to go back and make sure I got enough survey respondents. You got 225 results?
According to the comp plan, this page here on the end, it says that the open house, that the online survey was open from February 8th, 2019 until October 15th, 2019, and received a total of 397 responses. That was before this board took over. That was when we had Mr. Santee, Mr. Soul, Mr. Duffy, who's still around, Mr. Kroberger, and Denise and I. We all worked together. We informed them of these meetings. Mr. Wallace was on the committee with us. I hate to, and, we tried to get as much input as we could. We put flyers, we put little cards in local restaurants asking for residents to respond. We posted it. We had stuff in the library, in the newsletters that went out. We did everything that, we took input from the residents too. Dan can tell you, how do we get the word out? What do? We were saying we would share what everybody would share with their neighbors and things like, we tried everything to get that word out.
And all I'm saying is the majority of people in this room knew nothing about it. I'm just making a point, that's all.
Yeah.
We can agree to disagree.
How do we
I'm fine
fix
with
that
that.
then? Mail something out to every resident like we do with our newsletter? And if it's in there, we
If it
mail
says
something.
survey,
Yeah.
how about something that says survey, please respond by, and you fold it up and you tear it off and you
That's
fill
an
it out?
idea. Thank you, Fred. Okay.
Okay.
I will mention
And,
the comprehensive plan, as the solicitor mentioned, it's a planning document. It's made and designed to give a vision for where the township may want to. So it doesn't guarantee any project.
But Sanders' presentation today refers to the fact that if it's in the comprehensive, pardon me? Of course.
I just want to point out that the comprehensive plan, it's revisited every so often. It's a guiding planning document for the township. If there's feedback or input from the public when things that are planned out over those decade or 12 to 15 years come up, That's where we have the opportunity to come to the planning commission, because that's where land development applications come in usually first for public, comment and feedback. And then it still has to go through these other levels of reviews and approvals to make sure it fits the zoning of the township, make sure it fits any kind of request from the zoning hearing board. That would be an independent body from the board of commissioners. And it goes through all the reviews of the professionals. So I just want to kind of clarify that, because the comprehensive plan is being brought up a lot as something that's kind of laying out what's going to definitely happen over the next couple of years, and that's really not the case. It's a planning document that, unfortunately, a lot of municipalities just have it collect dust on the shelf. And this township does a great job of kind of referring it to see kind of where it was guiding with the recommendations when it was done over those years. But there's still nothing that's guaranteed or written in stone. It comes up on an individual case-by-case basis. And then after so many years, as things change over the years, it's revisited to refine for the next decade going forward. So I really wouldn't put too much weight on what is in the comprehensive plan for, say, 5-10 years down the road. It's just really a guiding document, and it's reviewed mostly by the Planning Commission and the folks that are in those committees, the residential folks that contribute to how it's put together. And then as things come up, it's asked for the public for feedback for a case-by-case basis.
So the point I was trying to make is we got an amendment to what was going to be talked tonight. You're doing a presentation, and one of the comments in there has to do with recommendations on the comprehensive plan. So that to me says that the comprehensive plan is carrying more weight than it's being led to.
Mr. Henkin,
Please
it's just
stay for
not.
my,
Okay,
yeah, and
okay.
please stay for my presentation. I know you
I
will.
wouldn't, I
Because
wouldn't
it's
miss it.
just a visual aid, and you'll hear what I have to say about that.
I
There's-
appreciate that.
And like I mentioned, it's that guiding document. So the municipality, if they didn't have anything, there's nothing to kind of refer to or kind of use as a guide, overall with a broad brush.
And I just want to reiterate, someone else made a point. If 97% of the residents like living here, and this is why we all moved here, why are we even considering making any changes to this Pembroke Parkway plan? I don't quite understand that, but
Well, if it's a applicant that comes in with a zoning change, they would have to go through the steps.
You can
of
say
zoning
no.
And everything else. Well, there's those bodies that review it.
But you
until
can say
there's
no.
Until there's an
Of course.
application that's submitted to the township, like for our end on the engineering side, I haven't had any application come across our desk for any development there. There's things that developers propose. Sometimes they take root, sometimes they don't. There's nothing that prohibits in this country someone saying they want to use a property for X, Y, and Z, but they still have to go through the steps through the township process. So if there is an application actually submitted, then they have to get reviewed. It becomes open to the public on agendas for feedback and comments, but that hasn't reached the point for this particular project.
And I'll reiterate, if and when this applicant wants to move forward, there will be a public hearing where the board will consider whether or not to approve their
they did
application.
submit a draft ordinance, is that correct?
There is a draft ordinance that they
And
have
that was
submitted.
made public just recently? Good to
I
know.
believe it was provided in a right to know request.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Fred. Fred Brino, 109.
Yes, good evening, Commissioners. I do understand the responses and well-made, of course. I'll pass on any real questions. I would just certainly hope over the next decade, the township consider the safety of all residents and, of course, continue to prudently manage our financial resources. Safety is extremely important. Having grown up in the city of Philadelphia, having witnessed what's presently the chaos that's occurring in our cities, I think we've heard a lot of positive comments about this wonderful township. And again, the only comments I made, I truly hope commissioners keep these things in mind.
Thank you, Fred.
Thank you.
Fred, what street do you live on?
I'm on White Oak Road, 109.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I couldn't read White Oak. Thank you. Thanks. Next up is Roger Hammond, 757 Bryan Way.
Good evening. Just let you know, I've lived in this township for 22 years, very happy. We had a third grandchild arrived and decided to move because our house was too small. We love this town so much that in lieu of finding a property better than ours, we stayed here. We built an addition. We got great results from your zoning and your code enforcement people to help us do exactly what we need to do. We stayed here. When I saw the Martin property sign, I've had one complaint here, and that was a helicopter's flying, and I got a very rude response from this group, and particularly from the guy from Merck, but I just dropped it. The helicopters stopped with COVID and went right back to work after COVID. They're flying right over our house, 100 feet in the air. Very annoying, but it's done. When I saw the Martin property sign, I immediately took some review of it. I happen to know someone that lived there, talked to him. I got feedback that you had, in fact, intended to claim the property, to grab the property through some eminent domain, I guess it is. And to me, that, even if I thought, well, probably, and you sent out an email to me, I get your emails, I get your correspondences, about, it's called rumors. And the rumors was we never did anything of that sort, that we were innocent, nothing never attempted that we were going to claim this property. And then since then, I see it was on the agenda. It wasn't voted on, apparently. So that upsets me because property ownership is the most guaranteed right in the entire country. It supersedes everything else that everything stands for. So any attempt to claim that property, I think this board, since it's still out there, there's still signs at the corner of Sumnertown and Allentown Road. I think that the board should stand up and say, no, we don't intend to do anything. That is his property for whatever the hell he wants to do with it. And if you can't make that claim, and if you did try to claim the property, I think it's shame on you. So I hope that's not the truth, because I don't know what the truth is. I'm an outsider. I don't attend a lot of these. I spent a lot of years in Lansdale as a president of the business association trying to work positive things out, and I got run out of town by politics. So I'm not a big fan of even being here tonight. But then I hear this property, and I don't really know much about high density, low density. I know I love Upper Gwynedd as it is, and as it has been for 22 years. But I hear the same politics that I see in the national government. I see national, state. The corruption started in the government, federal government, 50, 60, maybe 100 years ago. All we hear from them is, we're going to do this, but they never do that. We hear one party complaining the other. They don't talk about policy anymore. All they talk about is the hate of the other guys. The racism is a claim, this claim, that claim. They're fighting for the border. They're fighting against the border. We hear nothing from any federal government official that isn't hate for the other side. We got a governor race going on, and there's nothing but hate on the news. We hate this guy because he stands for that, when the people that know him know he doesn't stand for that. They can say anything they want in national, state, and even county politics. And now it's here in a town of 11,000 people where I see party against party. This property over here, I question how $1.something million can be approved by anybody without a written proposal approved at the local level. That tells me that the county is pulling strings, which means politics. The state is pulling strings, or the federal government is pulling strings, because you already have an ordinance you're talking about on this agenda. Why do we need anything? No one's proposed anything. No one, you have said that, no one has sent you anything to vote on, to talk about, to approve, to discuss with citizens. How can you say that and have anything on here that's giving some kind of a look-see review of any policy about that property?
There is no ordinance regarding that property on this
Well, you
agenda.
have something, I don't understand this. What is a text amendment?
That's just a comment of something that's been submitted to the
Well, I'm
township.
glad.
It's just
I hope that
there's no
nothing
action
is done to
tonight.
that property against the citizens, and nothing is done secretly. Because when I see money
not.
being approved by the county or the state or agencies of the federal government, I know how that works, because it was said tonight, that means they are now in control of some of what we do here in Upper Gwynedd.
County has no
And
standing.
you as a board should be saying, no, we don't do that. You should publicly announce in your newsletters, we are not interested in this proposal until someone presents a plan, until it can be properly viewed, and
It's not even a matter of interest. We legally can't require.
but it's the talk of the town. And this guy's
Not-
gotten money, apparently.
Sorry,
Who is
can
Walters?
Sorry,
Why does he have the approval of the county unless the county, which is Democratic, the state, which is Democratic, or the federal government, which is Democratic? Why are these people in our faces, proposing a change to our lives, and you don't even have anything to say about it. And by the time you do have something to say about it, I bet you it's already signed, sealed, and delivered.
It is, sir, that it is not signed, sealed, and delivered, and I'm going to say it again for, I think, the third or fourth time tonight. If that application is to move forward, it requires several different approvals from this board. Right now, the only thing that has even been suggested is zoning amendments. It would require a full-blown land development presentation and approval. We are so far removed from that.
Since you have a newsletter and you have an e-newsletter, could you be willing to state to the citizens of Upper Gwynedd that you have no interest in claiming the property at Martin's property, because that would be a land grab, or you have no interest, you deny that any money is going to be allocated, that money legally. There's no money allocated and there's no money allocated, but that reporter said there is.
Okay, sir, I think your 5 minutes are finished, and I'm going to respond to a couple of things you said. Again, there is nothing pending in front of this board this evening regarding either of the projects that you're talking about. The township has remained in contact with Mr. Martin and has continued to discuss the potential avenues for that property. One of the things that Mr. Martin has proposed is a zoning map and text amendment that would allow high-density residential to go in that property.
Why would you vote on an amendment if
We
you
have not-
don't
the
have
board has
any
not-
reason to do that other than the personal interest of Walters?
That's the Martin tract I'm talking about.
No.
And the board has not voted on that. It has not been presented to the board for consideration yet. That is one of the things that Mr. Martin has proposed for that property.
Okay. You have made no claim to try to take that property through eminent domain?
There's
or
nothing pending, there's nothing
Have you
pending
ever
right
done
now.
that? Have
and
you ever proposed that in this meeting?
We are, and again, the township remains in contact with Mr. Martin and his attorneys, and we have been in discussions
I'm more
for.
concerned about what's going on over here because I see a big deceit coming from somewhere, and I don't think it's
Sir,
coming
there's-
from
there's
here. I don't
nothing
believe that for a
deceitful. There's
second.
nothing-
I believe it's coming from the
Sir,
people
your
above.
5 minutes are up, and so you're going to have to let me respond. There is nothing deceitful here. Again, I'm going to say it again. If this project is going to move forward, it is going to require several public approvals from this board. And there's nothing that says that they have to approve anything that comes in front of them. This is a zoning and text amendment. It is in the board's legislative discretion, and it is something that is currently just being processed by the developer. If and when the developer makes a request to have a public hearing on either of those amendments, that is the time that the board will be able to consider the application. Most of the board has not even seen the ordinance yet.
Thank you, Roger. Next up, we have Tom Borneman of 722 Green Street.
Tom Borneman, 722 Green Street. I'm going to repeat something I've said here in numerous meetings before, and that is the people in this township do not want your national Democrat agenda brought here to our township. Your own 2040 comp plan states that people that live here currently that answered the survey said they like the township just the way it is. We don't want high density housing. The township is completely built, just about completely built out. And so I'm repeating that again. And I have a question about the reporter article. I know several of you stated that you never read it or never saw it, but I'm wondering why the county is saying that a list of home projects slated for the county funding include, and it goes on to talk about Cowpath Road in Hatfield, but then it also says $925,000 to the Walters Group for a project listed on the plan as Cornerstone at Pembroke Station in Upper Gwynedd.
Mr. Borneman, I can answer that for you.
Please.
That's a grant application to the county. It has nothing, it's a grant application. Can you hear me okay? I can see you. It's a grant application to the county. So they are welcome to apply to the county for a grant. We do it all the time. We apply for grants for projects that we may not complete.
The Walters people applied for the grant?
Yeah, I think so from what you guys are telling me, but that's what it sounds like. The township applied zero. We did not apply for any grants on behalf of the Walters Group. The Board of Commissioners did not authorize a letter of support on behalf of the Walters Group. I welcome you to submit an open records request, and I will gladly fill it for you very quickly, because I'm certain, unless some staff member here did something without telling me, that we did not do that.
Okay. I just want to be clear that the people in this township do not want this. And
Do you
so
want
when
it-
it
they
comes
don't want-
before you,
They don't want what? They don't want affordable housing in Upper Gwynedd Township?
no, we don't want high-density housing in areas where that zoning has to be changed.
Okay, but the, but affordable housing isn't the issue, it's high density. Is that correct?
Not necessarily.
So are you against affordable housing?
No, I'm against high-density housing.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear
Because
that
it
I,
has a negative effect on property values
okay,
of existing property. People that have lived here like myself for 73 years,
I've been here 30. Yeah.
okay? So I just want to make sure I'm clear on that.
And I was asking for clarification so that we can
Okay,
understand.
thank you.
And just, I've said this before to everybody, and I'll say it again. When we hear that you're an R, that means you're a resident. I don't care, we don't care. We're here to work with you and help you and explain to you how this all works. And we've offered to meet for coffee, tea, less informal, because we want to work with you. It's not a done deal. Maybe we'll be convinced not to do it when we see all the plans. We don't know yet because we haven't seen it, but we're here to talk to you. It's not this bitter fighting. Like he said at the night, it doesn't have to be this way in Upper Gwynedd. We don't want it that way. You know, Fred, I came to your house before, and I've talked to you, you know, because I've known you a long time. Wendy, I've known you a long time. I'll sit and talk to you. Come to my house. It's not, we shouldn't be fighting against each other with this. We all want what's best for Upper Gwynedd Township, you know? And you're sitting back there shaking your head saying, no, I don't. I'm not going anywhere. I've lived here 30 years. I've raised my family. And I've seen a lot going on too. I've seen it. And you know, it's change. It's what happens. But we can talk about this. This isn't something that we should be so defensive and accusing each other of. That's not who we are as Upper Gwynedd people, as people. We're better than that. And so we're here to talk to you about, you know, if we don't have the answer to your questions, we're going to get them for you. But I misquoted already tonight by saying for affordable housing. I was wrong with that. That's not what the paper says. And I don't want to give you, like Denise said, that I'm giving you false information. I don't want to lie to you and give you the wrong information. We're going to get it for you. We promise we will. It's just, we want to get you the right information. And that's, Fred, I think you had your turn, so.
Mr. Henkin, there's other people waiting to speak.
Michael Felmuth?
Evening. Mike Falmouth, 112 Cardinal Way. Real quick, I still believe all comments should be addressed to the chair and not back to the crowd. It will keep the meeting more civil. My question is, I believe the township has funding already for improvements on the walkway on the Green Ribbon Trail across North Wales Road to put up, paint and flashing lights. When's that going to start?
We just met about that today also, Mike. I'm going to toss it over to Isaac to answer some of those questions for you and explain the PennDOT permitting process.
We did go through, it's a PennDOT road, North Wales Road. So an HOP has gone through a highway occupancy permit. So that's all completed. The real delay on this one was the lead time for the mast arm that holds the sign over the road. So working with Public Works Department, they've finally gotten just about all the materials. And once they have that secure, they're planning to do it, as soon as possible once that's all set. So hopefully we'll see it in the next few weeks here.
I'm looking forward to the Green Ribbon Trail being improved.
So are we.
We are too.
Thank you, Michael. Next up, Mark Connolly, 11 Kearney Drive.
Mark Connolly, 11 Kearney Drive. I just wanted to say, and my apologies for going backwards to the last meeting, but I just want to say thank you for approving the Dickerson Road project. So I live about 700 feet from the intersection that is going to be affected by that. And I'm sure many of you, if not all of you, have seen the video last year from North Penn now. The road, Dickerson Road, was completely underwater. And I know that water, comes from basically my development, and basically my whole backyard was underwater during that flood. So I think that this is definitely a project that is sorely needed. And I'm appreciative that the board has taken the time to approve this. And I'm hoping that, with the next rainstorm that, once this gets handled, that, Dickerson Road will not be underwater. And I hope that the township takes more time to look at more projects like this. Obviously, we know what happened with the sewer plant. Was it 2 years ago now? This is something that is now coming up more and more in Upper Gwynedd Township with the more storms that we have that are like this. I'm hoping that this is something that the board can continue and hopefully not just benefit my development, but to benefit other developments in the area.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Mark, you can follow along on our progress. At budget time, we are always looking at stormwater projects. They're huge. As you can see how expensive they are, and we're always looking for the next place because there's issues all over the township.
Is there anyone else who'd like to make a public comment who hasn't already and maybe came late and didn't get to register? No? Okay. You have to come to the mic and tell us your address and your name. That's okay. If you tell us your name and your address, that'll be fine.
Okay. It's going to be very quick. My name is Peter Moore, 230 South 11th Street. I would like a definition of affordable housing. I don't think that's funny. I really would.
Again, that's something that the applicant has been proposing, so that would be a question that would probably best be answered by that applicant. I don't know that we have that information.
So I do know that through federal standards, like when, there's federal funds, obviously they applied for through the county, if they are federal or county funds, there is some sort of standard, I don't know what it is, that counts as affordable. But definitely, I'm 100% sure that the applicant will be explaining that if they come before the board and going through it, because it's a standard that you have to hit to be able to receive that type of funding.
I mean, I don't know
It's not defined by us.
I don't know if affordable means it's what the government gives them to spend, or if it's a number you get from going to work.
I do think it's based on your income level. The people that will be living there's income level is what qualifies it as affordable or not affordable.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, I am going to turn it over to our manager, Sandra Zadell, to continue with the meeting.
I'll go quickly because I think that my presentation on land development is going to be the most exciting thing that happens.
There's going to be a lot of great information in that, I know.
There will be a public hearing next week on the 16th about the drug paraphernalia ordinance that we discussed quite a bit last month. So if anyone on the board has any questions or anyone in the public has any questions about it, we're happy to answer them at this time. Okay, moving on to the next item, which will be item 11, will be a public hearing next week as well about our stormwater management ordinance. This is also required by DEP as part of our MS4 requirements, so that's something that we'll be moving forward and talking more about next week. Before I get started on my land development report, I want to do a quick manager's report about some exciting things that are happening in specifically public safety in Upper Gwynedd Township. So the first thing is I wanted to do a shout out for National Night Out. I don't know if anyone attended that's here, but it was a wonderful event. My shout out is specifically for Fred Lynch and for all the first responders that participated in the event to make it so successful, as well as our staff here in the Public Works Department and Park and Rec Department that worked so hard on it. I have another I don't even know if I'm supposed to talk about this yet because there was a press release and I'm not sure if it's really out yet, but our chief, Eric Geiger, just completed the International Professional Designation process. It's a process that awards the designation of Chief Fire Officer by the Commission on Professional Credentialing. And it's an application that Eric had, it's a credentialing that he had to apply for, and only 7 other chiefs in the county have that professional designation. So it's really exciting. There'll be a full article about it in this week's e-news. Certainly, I'm very excited for Eric because I know how hard he worked for this. It's a voluntary program as well that you have to put yourself through to see if you're up to muster. So I just wanted to give a congrats to Eric. And then lastly, I'm sorry that the chief isn't here. It might be because he lost the battle, but we had the Battle of the Badges this week. It was a blood drive. I hope some of you came. And there has been quite a lot of social media jabs back and forth. I'm glad I wasn't part of it between the fire department and the police department to try to up the donations. They got, I think 56 or 59 units of blood. The fire department pulled a win for the first time ever.
Wow.
So it's our 3rd annual Battle of the Badges. But we always do them in the summer when blood supplies are the lowest to be able to really have a good turnout. So I personally think public safety in Upper Gwynedd is going really well right now, and just wanted to point out those positives. Now I'm going to launch into my land development presentation. So as all of you that are joining us tonight may have guessed, I decided to make this presentation based on the number of questions that we have gotten from the public about the land development process in Upper Gwynedd, and in some ways it's the land development process in the Commonwealth. It's not turning on, Megan. No. It's okay. You can do it for me. Can you go back to the first slide? I also want to point out there were some handouts that we left that you can get, that if you are interested in them, just leave your information and I'll send it out, because I'm going to be referencing a document from the Department of Community and Economic Development. They have a local government center for excellence. They do training for local government officials. They do the study that we're doing for the fire company. They're a state organization. It's not a political, it's a department of the state. And they have a planning series number 8 that talks about land development and the process, and that's some of what I used to develop this presentation. Next slide. So I want to talk about the regulatory environment. So these are the laws that the township has to follow when considering land development applications. I never like to leave out the US Constitution because, as mentioned earlier today, our property rights, our private property rights are very important. And those are private property rights afforded to every resident, no matter how long they lived here or if they're a new future consideration resident thinking to buy property and develop property. Our zoning ordinance, the Upper Gwynedd Township SALDO, that stands for Subdivision and Land Development Ordinance, but we always say SALDO, so I like to let you know what we're talking about for all of our acronyms. And the next important acronym is MPC, that stands for Municipal Planning Code. These are, the MPC is a state level regulation that is imposed upon municipalities by, and I'm not saying imposed is a bad way, but it's top down from the state regulating how municipalities can approve land development. The SALDO is something that the Board of Commissioners can vote on and amend. Obviously, the board has no ability to amend the US Constitution, but they also can amend the zoning ordinance by legislative action. And each piece plays a part. So on the left side of the frame is the MPC and what it governs, and on the right side is the SALDO. So first, the MPC, because that's sort of the higher level governing law. It grants authority to municipalities to be able to enact a SALDO, and it grants the time frames for applications. And that time frame is 90 days. So if someone applies for land development, unless they waive that time frame, we have to take action on it within 90 days from when we receive a land development application, which is different than what we've received from the Walters Group, which is a zoning text amendment application. That has no time frame. And it also dictates the process and procedures of how we move forward. The SALDO, on the other hand, is more localized. It talks about the submittals and design details. It's most of the stuff that Isaac reviews for the township. The layout of land development, sidewalks, trails, how we're gonna do the lighting, gutters, fire safety, fire hydrants, all of those important design details for land development, as well as talking about fees and waivers. So we have, the board is allowed via the MPC to make waivers on certain parts of our own SALDO. It sets our standards for waivers. For example, we have a waiver available for smaller projects, like things that occur that are not over 5,000 square feet, which are much smaller. They can apply for a waiver of the process, which allows them to spend a little bit less time and money on the plans that they have to submit. It still gets approved by the Board of Commissioners. And it also regulates the stages of development. So that is the MPC and the Saldo. Next slide, Megan. I made this beautiful graphic. I hope Dan Sokol puts it in the paper because I think it really does help. And it may be a little confusing, but I'm going to go through each step. And I welcome you, if you can't see, to come up, as well as you can reference it. Probably if you have your phone in your pocket, it is linked to our agenda, so you can look more closely at it. So on the left is a by right plan. When we say by right, that means that the applicant, the property owner, has the right to develop that plan, and it's in accordance with the zoning regulations. So for example, trying to think of a recent by right plan that we approved. Basically, if you wanted to build single-family homes in a residential R1 zoning regulation, you could come in and just say, we don't need to do a zoning approval. Our plan is by right. We're building single-family homes where we're allowed to build single-family homes. And you'll go through this process. You'll make contact with us. That usually starts with Van Rieker, our planner. We talk about any zoning process suggestions. In the case of a by right plan, there usually isn't, but at least that's usually how we first hear about it. Second, it goes to the PRC, which you've heard discussed today. At the PRC level, staff makes suggestions for design, consideration for plans and projects and vision that might be in the comp plan, consideration of trail design. If the project proposal is near one of the trails that we want to build, we'll ask the applicant to include that in their design work. And any other design details, for example, do they need to lay a public sewer lateral? Some of the more boring stuff. Sorry, Isaac. When I say engineering stuff's boring, but it's more the details of what are going to be the hurdles, what do we see as things that we want the applicant to include. And then I just want to point out on this graphic, to try to make it easier to understand, everything that's green is a public process and everything that's white is a private process, or I don't want to say behind closed doors, but it's at the staff level. So the initial contact in PRC, those are staff level processes. And then instantly, as soon as an official application is received, it goes out into the public process. So they file an official application. That's called an application for land development. The 90-day clock starts. If we mess up and don't meet that 90-day clock, it's something called a deemed approval, which Megan and I have nightmares about, which will not happen in Upper Gwynedd Township. And we move the application through the process. So the first step in the process with the land development application is, and this is sort of something that happens behind the scenes, is we send the plans to all of our professionals to review them. So Isaac creates a review letter, the Montgomery County Planning Commission creates a review letter, not because we have a contract with them, that happens in every municipality that they're the designated planning agency for. And our fire marshal, all of our consultants review the plans and ask that applicant to change things that might not be compliant with our saldo. Lots of times applicants, for whatever reason, maybe because the saldo's really detailed, they make an error, like put the sidewalk where they're not supposed to. Isaac sends them a letter, they fix it. Once we've decided that it looks good enough, that the professionals have said they've met all of the things that they need to do, then we send it to the Planning Commission. This is the first phase where the public can have input. We send notices to every property owner within 500 feet of the property where the proposal is. Those are mailed notices to the people's homes. You also may notice in your newsletter that we do list upcoming developments in the newsletter, but I wouldn't use that as your best resource because the newsletter only comes out 4 times a year, whereas if you sign up for our e-news or just simply call Megan and I, we could tell you what's in the pipeline. The Planning Commission then reviews it. They have a process where they go out and do a site visit, they look at the property, they have a public meeting, and usually before the Planning Commission reviews it, because I'm only talking about municipal process, the applicant has a meeting with the residents. That's not a municipal process. That's the developer decides to do it because usually at PRC we say, we want to make sure you meet with our residents and find out what's going on, what their interests are. That recently just happened here about, I think we started it with Roosevelt Court and it's happened every time since. So then at the Planning Commission meeting, any resident can comment, you can ask questions. Sometimes Planning Commission members or residents may make suggestions at that point in the process, and the applicant will decide if they want to incorporate them into their plans. Finally, at the very end, after all of that, it moves on to the Board of Commissioners for approval. Did I forget anything? No?
Well, there is the county, we do.
I did mention the county review letters, yes. Okay, so where it gets a little more complex is where there's zoning relief needed, which is the right side of the slide. Again, I've said it previously in public meetings. In Upper Gwynedd Township, our procedure and past practice and policy and the way we've just always done things, and in every municipality I've worked in, any applicant can bring us any type of proposal. We decide then during this zoning relief plan needed how it's going to proceed after they initially bring it to us. The point we're in with the Walters Group is they've brought it to us, they've made an application for a zoning process. The process that they've elected to apply for is a text amendment. The other choices in this zoning process could be going before the zoning hearing board to ask for any potential relief that they need, a text amendment, a map amendment. Those are two legislative processes that the board can handle, or sometimes there's something called a conditional use, but I don't even want to get into that because that's even more complicated. But those are all zoning procedures. As you can see, they're noted in green. Those are public processes, all of them. In fact, we've had on our agenda the Walters Group and Van's report for many months. That's a public agenda. It's been on there. So at this point, the applicant comes to meet with us at PRC generally. Sometimes an applicant that needs zoning relief doesn't know which direction their plan should go. Like, do they need to go to the zoning hearing board? Is this something that maybe should be considered for a text amendment? A good example would be the recent MCIU application where the applicant wanted to build a, I guess school is the right word, school-based service, educational service in an area that it wasn't properly zoned. This is a time where at the PRC level, we suggested going through the text amendment process because the project is something that we wanted for this community. The board wanted, I should say. They believe that providing services that our residents used to have to drive to Norristown for now in Upper Gwynedd Township is a good thing. So that's the reason it went in that direction. Instead of via to the zoning hearing board, we wanted to make it possible that that school could and those services could reach the community as quickly as possible. So the applicant may go back and forth between the PRC and zoning discussion several times. Again, even just like the by right plan at PRC, there's suggestions for design, consideration of the comp plan, because it's a planning document and we're talking about plans, trails, etc. Again, we recommend that they meet with the neighbors. Sometimes that meeting with the neighbors happens before a zoning procedure happens. For example, we just had a developer meet with residents a couple weeks ago before they've submitted their application. That one's going to be going through the zoning hearing board. The 90-day clock begins if they apply for, well, actually, it's a different clock if they need to go to the zoning hearing board. Whatever clock that applies to their application kicks in. So if they're going to the zoning hearing board, it's a 45-day clock, if I'm correct. And if it's a legislative action like the Walters Group, there is no time clock. The board could take as long or as not long as they'd like in reviewing that. If they get approval at the zoning, whatever zoning process they go for, again, it becomes just like the by right plan. They go to planning commission, the planning commission has input, the residents get notified that are 500 feet around, and then it goes to the Board of Commissioners. And somewhere in there, it gets all the review letters by the county and our professionals. So that is the process. Where we are with the Walters Group is on the right-hand side in the box that says zoning process. So when we say there's still a lot of time and things are going to come back before the board, this is sort of laid out in a visual of where we are. We're at that top right zoning process right now. I'm going to keep going. So I am going to give time for questions, but I'm going to just finish here what I'm saying. In the case of a question I got a few meetings ago is why don't we just tell people not to develop or not to move their project forward? If it's not a by right plan, the goal of staff is to respond to all stakeholders and further through the plans through a public process. If we just say no to all proposals and don't let them progress through the public process, we alone are making decisions for the community. And one of the residents asked me earlier, how do I feel about the Walters Group proposal, I don't want to be the only person at Upper Gwynedd Township making that decision. I want residents to get involved and get to make that decision. I want it to come before the board so that it becomes a public process and it's not just a staff decision. Some properties in some cases have compelling reasons for proceeding that may need a zoning amendment. Such cases may be that they agree with the comp plan, that they're cleaning up blight, that they're cleaning up environmental issues, or they're providing important community services. There could be more reasons. Those are just the main ones that I came up with. In a by right plan, the U.S. Constitution, along with several layers of state and municipal code, afford private property owners the right to develop their property in accordance with the published rules and regulations. If the board votes no on a by right plan, the applicant then will likely sue the board in a lengthy legal battle that we generally won't win. If we say no to a by right plan, that generally would get overturned by the courts because it's a requirement. It's people's property rights that say you have the right to develop this property in accordance with the zoning. I'm going to pause there and allow time for questions. Oh, sure.
When you say, the last thing you said, the by right plan and public
Purchase.
and public purchase, so that's your private, like a resident, or is a developer considered a private?
A developer is also a resident, unfortunately. I know people don't like me to say that, but if they purchased a parcel of land in Upper Gwynedd Township, they're a resident. They're planning to build a future, they have property rights on that parcel afforded to them by the U.S. Constitution.
Okay.
Carl, can you come to the mic? Say your name and address again. Sorry, you have to keep going.
I'm sure you've forgotten who I am, but I'm Carl Smith from
Totally.
815
I
Macintosh.
see you every week at the deli.
Yes. Yeah, you're getting to be, well, acquaintances, let's say.
Yes.
So,
Someday we'll be friends, Carl.
oh, we'll wait and see. So the by right plan means you're following the existing zoning.
Mhm.
The Walters Group is not a by right plan, so they got to go through a zoning change. Is that correct?
Correct.
So it's a totally different animal. This board,
Right.
Dismiss-
Megan, can you go back?
this board could dismiss this process immediately. They don't have to sift through all this information because it's not a by right plan.
Well, so the point I'm making here is that the board doesn't have that official application yet. We as staff have the application, we're looking at it. The board can dismiss it. Yes, they could, the board, at any public meeting, 3 of them can say, don't do this or do this. But at this point, generally what we do is unless we're compelled for some really big reason not to continue looking at it, we want to bring it to the public process.
Let me try to break it down to.
No, I
something.
understand what
Wait,
you're
no, let
saying.
me-
Shouldn't the board just say
Let
no?
me use you as an illustration. So you're in charge of the township administration. I assume you make personnel decisions. You look at resumes for people that want to work here, as a lot of us do in our world, businesses. So you're saying everything has to be considered. You look at someone's resume, you say, oh, this guy didn't even show up for school. He right away, you reviewed the application. It took you 1.5 seconds to say no.
I hear what you're trying to
Okay?
illustrate.
You could do the same thing here, is my point.
And then I would cut out the public process. And that's why government is, let me finish, Carl. Government is different than business. The way that I run the township administration in a personnel decision is a private dealing. The way that the township decides on land development matters is a public matter, and it requires a public process.
So how
So if I
many,
just looked at it and said no, you would not be standing where you are getting to talk about it, nor would the board have a chance to weigh in. And that's not within my rights as a township manager.
so you're telling me that every single person that comes in to the township that wants a zoning change on any type of development is given this kind of consideration? Is that what you're telling me? Hard to believe, actually.
Actually, I would tell you that sometimes we say an outright, no, that's outrageous. Like, for example, in a recent open records request, someone did ask to build over 100 apartment units here, and that was what was deemed at the time high density. Over 100 versus 44, it's a very different story. That is within the staff's discretion to decide if we think that the board might be interested in what's being proposed. That's what we're doing.
But,
So
but
you're
what the point I'm
trying to
making.
trick me. I'm
No, I'm
telling
not trying to
Carl-
trick you at all. I'm not sophisticated at all like that. What I'm trying to find out is the process and understand it clearly. There's no way, I mean, I'm a simple guy. There's no way the township can sit here and entertain every single application that wants a zoning change. I don't believe that. So what I'm trying to say is, it can be a very simple, streamlined process where you've considered it, you've reviewed it, and the answer is no.
But I'm not the township. I'm just the township manager. That's the point I want to make.
Okay, but that does happen.
Sandra,
Yes.
in reference to his question, you said the application had 100. Would it matter where they want to build
Absolutely.
in terms of?
Just like I mentioned
how
in the
many-
prior, yeah, where they want to build, what they're interested in building, if it's cleaning up a problem, for example, homelessness, for example, blight, for example, a vacant property that we want to see developed because, like the Royal Farms area, those types of reasons.
So if it was a parcel that was, 5 acres versus a parcel that was 100 acres,
Yeah,
so then the application would deem, if they wanted to build 100 houses on 5 acres of land, well, that's not going to fit. So
Right,
that's
that's
something
high.
that you could immediately say
much higher density.
no to.
100 parcels or 100 buildings on 5 acres. It's hard for the board to converse when there's conversations, but 100 units on 5 acres is much more dense than 100 units on 100 acres.
No,
So,
but my point is, when you say that you can say no to one versus immediately versus saying no after a public process,
Mhm.
it would matter based on the acreage. Because if you tried to build 200 units on 1 acre of land, of course, that doesn't make any
Right,
sense. So
yes,
that's
some
something that you
proposals
can-
are outrageous.
That's what I'm
yes,
trying to, okay.
Yes.
so what's the process of
The
discerning
litmus
what?
test,
What, well, litmus test, yeah.
yeah, that's up to the staff, and it's different in every case because
Oh, now we're
every
getting
single
somewhere.
parcel.
So it is discretionary. So it is.
No.
Why don't you go
Mr.
ahead?
Smith, what happens in the review process is staff will suggest to the applicant that this is an outrageous proposal, and the applicant typically withdraws their request. The applicant in that case were to say, no, I want to move forward regardless, the township would hold the hearing. There are not that many of these requests that come in.
Yeah.
So the Walters Group hasn't been dismissed as outrageous by this board, is what you're saying.
No, you got it wrong by
Oh,
the
I did.
staff.
Okay.
By the staff.
Okay.
The board, I mean, it's true,
The board
it's by
is
the staff.
isolated from all this stuff. It just goes on swirling about and they just come in at the last minute and figure
And
things out.
Mr. Smith, if you've ever sat in a meeting with myself, Sandra, and Isaac, what we repeatedly tell developers is nobody in this room gets a vote. This is our thoughts. You want to go forward, fine. It's at your own risk. If you don't want to go forward, you're welcome to withdraw your application. That's typically the conversation.
What you're asking me to believe, though, is that these folks on the board have no idea about any of this.
No, that's not what we're
that's
asking.
not
We've
even
told you
close to
several
what-
times that 2 board members sit on the PRC.
Okay.
So of course, can I see a facial expression or get some understanding? Yes. Can I call them and talk to them? Yes, that's my job as the manager. But what I think you're trying to imply is that this board is overwhelmingly supporting the Walters Group
Yeah,
application.
that's what I sense.
And that is not the case. They will get to vote on that publicly.
Well, Liz asked Tom about whether he supports fair, equitable housing. I asked Van Rieker last meeting last month if we were in compliance with the Fair Housing Act. We are, he said. So why would you assert that in a meeting like this?
I was just trying to clarify for
Well,
my.
you're trying to trap him in a political trap. That's what
No,
you're
I
doing.
felt as,
what
if
you
that's,
did.
if that's how it came off, that's
Yeah,
not what I
absolutely,
meant.
it's how it came off.
Was it high density? Was it affordable housing? Was it the Martin track? Is it the Wal? I
No,
just want
no.
clarity.
Are you against affordable housing is what you asked?
Mr. Smith, this is,
I was trying to
you're
understand.
mischaracterizing, you're mischaracterizing Commissioner McDaniel's
That's your opinion.
statements. And there have been suggestions in this meeting room that low-income housing was not something that some individuals wanted to see. So that was Commissioner McNamey's clarifying point.
Yeah, we don't want to see
And
it.
I think that your 5 minutes have expired on this particular question
And to
point.
this gentleman about civility and running it all through the chairman, you're not the chairman, by the way.
I am not the chairman, I'm
So
the
why are
solicitor.
you always taking the point? He's asking you to go through the chairman, all of us go through the chairman, but you're running the show. I just thought that would be something we should
Not
point
running
out.
the show, but thank you.
Okay, moving on to DCD recommendations in the planning phases. So I wanted to talk about, I think sometimes that the PRC in these meetings has come under a little fire, or there's some suggestion that maybe that shouldn't be happening. But this is from the handbook that is given to local government on how we're supposed to handle land development. And these are quotes. It's quoted exactly from that document that I left out for anyone that wants it, and I'm happy to email it. At the sketch plan phase, a municipality may be able to provide some important input into the project design. The developer can learn about factors that affect the design or the layout that could avoid costly mistakes in the preparation of a preliminary plan. Sketch plans or pre-application meetings provide an opportunity to improve the quality of development that's advantageous to the community and the developer. And all parties to the land development application are encouraged to get together as early as possible in the process. That's what we do here in Upper Gwynedd. By instituting the PRC, the initial phase of the review process can be less contentious and more apt to foster consensus building than a more formal preliminary review process. The pre-application conference can increase cooperation amongst the developer, his agents, and the municipality, and that generally, that result can be an application submitted as a preliminary plan that is acceptable to the developer and the municipality as the formal review period begins. Stakeholder viewpoints. So something that staff and I'm sure the board take into consideration when looking at land development review process is that there's three different main stakeholders: the local government, the citizens, and the developers. And each of us bring different perspectives into the process. From the local government officials' side, they have the challenge of representing the public interest. Ideally, it's embodied in the comprehensive plan. Practically, local officials are beholden to multiple bottom lines. They're beholden to the generation of tax revenue versus the cost to serve development, different neighborhood interests, limited administrative capacity, different other factors. And developers really just, I hate to say it, but they're really looking to make a profit and are sensitive to the money cost of time. That's something we hear from developers all the time. Most are not averse to typical regulations, but desire that the regulations in the development review process be clear and predictable. And I will say that most developers, then perceived, are interested in doing a quality project that contributes to the community. They want to be known as a community partner that's going to do something good for the residents. And I'd say unless your house is an original farmhouse in Upper Gwynedd from years and years ago, you are living in a home that a developer developed. So we all are part of that process. And lastly are the citizens. They want to see their public interest served, but usually their interests are narrower. And this is true of any of us as citizens. We're most concerned with the area that's going to affect us in our neighborhoods, and they're uncertain of the change that new development might bring, which I think is a bit of what we hear in these meetings. In conclusion, the most important aspects of administrating the land development process include fairness, following the law and regulatory timelines, factoring in the stakeholders, the planning documents, and the community interest, and factoring in regional planning initiatives. Are there any other questions from the board? From the public? Just, we'll wait for the chair to call on you. Several people had their hands raised. It's okay.
Fred, go ahead and, yeah, it's okay,
that's-
and we'll get to everybody.
Fred Hinkin, 802 Clover Drive. Could you go back to that previous slide?
Yes.
So it says citizens also want to see the public interest served. You can all read, but the fact that it says our interests are narrow, I get that, but I think protecting our homes and neighborhoods is probably the most critical thing that anyone in this room would really be concerned about.
Yeah.
I understand, I don't know where you prioritize, if it's a third, or whatever, but I would like to again, I'm not asking you to.
We're all equal.
Understood. I'm just emphasizing to this board that I think protecting our homes and neighborhoods is what's really important to most of us sitting in this room. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. Roger? State your name again and your street, please, your address.
Dr. Hammond, 757 Bryan Way. Question on the zoning change. Based on your diagram on the right side, that zoning request, even a text amendment would have to be approved through the zoning board, would go to public meetings, or is this something, a bypass of the zoning by having a quick?
So if they're doing a text amendment, that's a legislative action by the board. So in this case, the Walters Group that I think you're here about tonight, that is a legislative action that then, so if the applicant chooses to apply for a zoning text amendment, that decision then goes to the Board of Commissioners. If they choose to do an application for a zoning hearing board relief, that goes to the zoning hearing board.
Why would they do that other than to try to get a quick fix and not have to go through public hearings? Is
Nope,
the
there's still
text
public
change a
hearings.
significant change to affect the public, or is it
In
not?
both cases, there's public hearings. It's just a matter of, is it at a board hearing or is it a zoning hearing
They
board
would
hearing?
still be publicly in front of the board.
Absolutely.
Make that change. Thank you.
You can come up, I don't know your name, if you could just say your name.
Roger,
and your-
Roger, just to clarify, because you said it would come before the board. No, if it was at the zoning, it would go before the zoning.
Right, if it's a zoning hearing board application, it goes before the zoning hearing board, but if it's a text amendment, it goes before the Board of Commissioners.
But
Yeah.
either way, it would be publicly advertised and it would be announced.
Hi, my name is Ismail Naiwaz. I live in 744 Mallock Place, and I have an accent, so I'm trying to go slow. I'm confused a bit. I've been here for a year. I just celebrated my first year in Upper Gwynedd Township, so I'm kind of trying to understand the process. In the zoning process that you have with the Walter Group, it's my understanding, and maybe I'm wrong, that you have initiated a change of zoning from light industrial to something else.
Well, you're accurate in that the applicant has initiated a change of zoning. The township has not initiated a change of zoning.
So in this process, is it at the zoning process right now it's happening?
Top
Okay.
right, yep.
So my question to you is that why is this there instead of waiting for an official application and then taking a look at the zoning changes? What I'm trying to understand is that if the zoning process says, okay, we're going to change from light industrial to that, and the application is refused, so what happens to that change of zoning?
So that's a great question. If the Board of Commissioners voted on a text amendment and voted no, I believe the applicant could still go to the zoning hearing board.
They could, in order
Wouldn't
to,
be a great idea, but.
in order to construct what their concept plan, they would need a lot of relief to do that. So they would have to figure out all the sections of the zoning code that they would need relief from, then they could appear in front of the zoning hearing board, and then they'd have to meet the standard for a variance.
But would you explain to me what's the logic of going through the zoning process first and then going to the official application instead of the opposite?
Oh, I'm sorry. They have an official application for a zoning process. They don't have an official application for a land development. I should have clarified that in my slide. So where it says official application in the slide, the third box down, that is the official land development application. They have done an official zoning application for a text amendment.
But I think my question stands to, for my understanding, why there is not a land development first application, and then if it's accepted, then you can do the zoning.
The zoning comes first because the zoning dictates, I don't know, the law trumps the land development. You need zoning to be able to develop.
Under the law, you can proceed with both applications concurrently if you choose to do so. Most municipalities, particularly with something like this that involves a zoning change, prefer to consider the zoning first. Because if they don't get their zoning, it's very difficult to go through the land development process. Likewise, developers prefer to go through the zoning process first because it's very expensive to pay an engineer to get fully developed plans in order to go through the SALDO review process. Isaac and his team are going to review everything, and it's back and forth between the engineers for however many rounds it goes. So a lot of developers prefer to find out if they're going to get their zoning before they do that.
Okay.
Sometimes if we're going through the review process and Isaac identifies, you know what, you can't meet the front yard setback here, so you're going to need relief for that. An applicant can say, well, I'd still like to go through the SALDO process, and you can condition my approval on getting that relief. If they don't get that relief, that means that they can't build that plan. So it is a risk for them to do that. So it's not unusual for an applicant to want to go through the zoning process first.
Okay. As far as the township, last question, if the zoning process says, okay, we're going to go from one zoning to another, and the application doesn't go through, does the land keep the same zoning, or does it revert back to what it was before?
You have really good questions. If someone is granted zoning relief, that zoning relief goes with the Maybe I should let
this-
the lawyer answer this one. I'm
If
gonna
they're
let.
granted zoning relief at the zoning hearing board, so in my front yard setback example, they said I can't meet the front yard setback. The zoning, the underlying zoning of the parcel stays the same. If they come in front of the board for a map amendment, that is a request to change from residential to industrial, industrial to institutional, whatever the change is, it would change the zoning of that parcel.
Okay.
And then they would have to comply with all of the zoning requirements of that new district. But if that application is denied, the underlying zoning stays the same as it was before the application.
Thank you so much.
Anyone else?
All right, I hope that helped clarify a few things. Moving through the agenda, next up is Nathan Crittenden, our Finance Director's financial report. Is this something you want to talk about, Nate, or should I be talking about it? You want me to talk? Okay, no problem. So just a general, at each quarter, we review, well, Nate reviews our performance all the time, but at each quarter, he provides a report to the Board of Commissioners, comparative for our budget from this year to last year. So real estate taxes year to date are 99% to budget and exceed prior year collections by $6K. As of today's date, that exceeded last year's collections by about $10K. So that's good news. Act 511 taxes, these are the taxes by the Local Enabling Tax Act. Our revenue increased, is this true, Nathan? Our revenue increased $623,000 from year to year, from 2021 to 2022. These are our earned income taxes and real estate transaction taxes. So I think everyone knows the real estate market's hot, prices are up, so of course we bring in more revenue. Wow, real estate transfer tax increased by 71%. So it's very significant, and it means that, as everyone here has shared tonight, Upper Gwynedd is a great place to live, work, and play, as we like to say. And earned income taxes increased by 11%. So that's wonderful news. And that contributes, this wonderful news that we often, never mind, I'm not going to say it because I'm just going to knock on wood and move on. I don't want to jinx anything. Interest earnings is just a little $4,000 difference between the 2 years, and this return reflects a 50% increase as compared to the township's position last year. Our rent and franchise fees have increased by $30,000 due to a multi-year agreement and the timing of the receipts of payments exceeding the 2021 level by $30,000 or 106%. Public safety revenue increased by $108,000 between the years because of utilization of police special details, tripling prior year revenues, and applications for building and sign permits, which have increased $72,000 between the years. This is an overall 38% increase, and strangely, these applications for buildings and things like that have really grown since COVID. It's something that was an unexpected thing that happened where people were home more, they're doing more to their homes. General government revenue decreased by $23,000. It's a variable revenue stream due to applications coming to the township at various stages. Culture and recreation experienced a significant increase of 58%, and this is park and rec stuff, which obviously during COVID was down due to not being able to be together. General fund expenditures vary about 19%, and it's due to planned budgeted expenses, legal fees, and community contributions. As stated in last quarter's report, the lion's share of the budgeted increase with salary was due to staffing changes because of retirements, but also increased to reflect the various professional services as daily activity and continuity of businesses returns to normal. In the building code department, this is what I was referring to earlier, we have an increase of $292,000 between years to increasing capital project costs and labor and inflation material costs, and a carryover from a prior project. Police expenditures reflect a decrease of $621,000. This is due to the timing of the release of pension contributions, so it's not like it's a timing issue rather than a real fluctuation. While there's a slight increase between the years, this budget category has only achieved 41% of expectation and is well within the budgetary tolerance. Public Works costs increase. This increase is due to timing of capital infrastructure projects, maintenance payments, and rising fuel costs, which we all have to pay those rising fuel costs. Even with this increase, the budget category has only spent 22% of its overall budget, so we're still in line there. And all other cost centers and line items remain within budget and expectations. And this is just for the general funds budget that we're talking about. Did you have anything you wanted to add, Nate? For those of you who don't know, Nate Crittenden is our finance director here at the township. He and I work together to manage the finances of the township.
So yes, this is for the general funds. Specifically, I do want to note two things. The Public Works, as I said, the increase is due to the timing of infrastructure projects. Some of these projects are carryover from last year due to the timing of receiving materials that were prior ordered, that were on back order. Unfortunately, there's not much we can do about the increase in inflation, as we've all seen and heard through the national news. But we do our best to try to negotiate with our vendors and try to keep a good relationship to lower these costs, as you've seen from me, meeting after meeting, offering more savings. I do also want to make a notation that while the police are showing a $31,000 increase between years, this is a very, although it's going up, it's all inflation. And as compared to the communities around us, we are actually the second lowest as far as increase between years. So I do want to make that statement, and for everybody to know that we are spending money very reasonably around here and doing our best to try to keep costs cut down.
Thanks, Nate. I'm glad there were so many residents here for this presentation because it's one of the most important things that we do. Does anyone on the board have any questions? Anyone from the public? Okay. Just another financial note, we're about to embark on budget season, which starts usually this month. Van Rieker's not here. He is on vacation, so Megan's going to give his planning and zoning report.
These are big shoes to fill, filling Van's. I know we discussed this in detail tonight, but on Van's report is the proposed zoning map and text amendment for 1500 Pembroke Parkway, the proposal for approximately 44 dwelling units in the Transit Overlay District, and that draft is still being reviewed. And then the zoning hearing board application for 322 Gosling Drive, that was a variance to permit 1% increase in the building coverage, and that was to permit a rear yard shed. And that was approved on July 26th by the zoning hearing board. I got lucky with the light report tonight from Van.
Next time you have to do the land development presentation. Megan handles land development for the township. Isaac, you're up.
Thanks, Andrew. For this month, we have our attached engineering report, as we typically do, to give you an update on the active land development projects in the township, as well as some grading permits and other things that come across our desk. There are a few land developments in active construction right now: Wheatley Walk, Roosevelt Court, Wissahickon Avenue has started as well, for those that travel in that part of the township. And we've actually piggybacked a bit on the road improvements that the 180 Wissahickon Avenue is doing for drainage on their side of the road. The township has been working the last probably a week or two on adding some drainage improvements on the opposite side of the road. So Wissahickon Avenue had a few issues with water really kind of building up, and you know it was inevitable you'd have to drive through it during big storms. It's hopeful that between our work and the land development's work, that road should be a lot safer and drier during these big storms. Two things I wanted to highlight are our road program. It's had a little bit of a slow going as far as getting moving, but we wanted to announce that the start of work date is next Monday, the 15th. And they'll be milling and overlaying quite a few roads around the township, as well as some ADA ramp construction for improving some corners and crossings. Some of the ramp construction is associated with our Montco 2040 grant for the improved crossings. So that'll get underway, and we're working with staff and the contractor to make sure that we get the notifications out as much as we can to give folks a heads up about which roads are going to be happening when. And that'll be, probably about 2 months or so altogether to get through the whole contract. The other thing we wanted to mention tonight was just our stream assessments. So it's a part of our MS4 program, but I thought it was worth mentioning with the time of year that comes around the fall with some of the bigger storms. We're making a concerted effort this year to assess our streams, both in the Wissahickon and Skipback watersheds, identify areas that might be kind of out of sight most of the time, but are behind a lot of neighborhoods. And the idea being that if we can locate and clean up some of the clogs that are in the waterways, whether it's fallen trees or just a buildup of kind of debris and leaves, that will just give ourselves the best chance and put ourselves in the best position to let that water through when these big storms roll through the area. So it's an ongoing effort, but this year is really the first year we're adding that as a line in our MS4 program to focus on that and work with Public Works to clean up some of those areas. And
I
I'd
have
be
a
happy to
question.
answer any questions. Yeah.
When you say back to the roads program, so you said that you're going to notify the residents. So the list that came out with all the streets that were going to be done, that's not the list in order?
The contractor did provide a schedule of what they anticipate for the dates. It's more of like a few dates range for
The
each of the
list was
locations.
for the budget. It's not the list of the schedule.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Oh.
I think she's referring to the list that was in the weekly news.
Yeah.
Oh, gotcha.
And
Okay.
also in the budget. That's just a list in order of Willard's Head. but the
Okay, so
schedule
that's
is
not
dictated by
in
the
order of when it's
contractor.
going to be done?
Right.
Oh, okay.
You can stay tuned for all of those updates. If you are in one of the neighborhoods, like Isaac said, you'll see the signs, you'll get a notification. Otherwise, we'll be doing weekly updates on our social media, on our website, and in our weekly news
Okay.
of the project.
Thank you.
And it was also printed in the newsletter this year. Anything else?
Thank you.
All right, we have a bunch of staff department reports for the packet. Those will be going on the consent agenda next week, as well as items 20 and 21, which are minutes approval. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Solicitor Gallagher to discuss the options for the board for tax assessment appeals.
Thank you. So as the board knows, from time to time, a matter will come in front of the board for settlement of a tax assessment appeal. Typically, the school board or the school district rather, takes the lead in negotiating those agreements or litigating those matters in front of the courts of common pleas. What we are suggesting is that in order to avoid a challenge to the township's participation in those matters, that the board establish a policy that determines which matters it will monitor. There are 3 suggestions in the memo that we provided. The first being that the board can choose to enter into all cases. Right now, the school district does not enter its own appearance in all matters that are challenged. Typically, it's only the larger matters. They set a dollar threshold, and those are the ones that they typically entertain. Secondly, the township could choose to enter its appearance in cases that the school district likewise enters its appearance in. Or third, the township could set a dollar threshold at the board's discretion as to which matters it would like to monitor on its own. Typically, as I said, the school district takes the laboring oar in litigating and negotiating these matters, as they get a large percentage of the tax dollars that come from these assessments, or they are on the hook for a much larger percentage of any refund that is negotiated. But the township does monitor these matters in order to make sure that its interests are protected.
And you're looking for some direction from the board?
Yep, so I'm looking for some direction as to which of those 3 options would be most appealing, and then we can prepare a resolution to that effect for your consideration next week.
What does everybody think? Anyone have a strong opinion right out the gate?
I definitely don't think we should enter every single last matter.
Right,
You would be the first board that did.
right, especially because of that, right? So we can eliminate the first one.
And
So,
I'm sorry.
go ahead, Martha.
I would use the, my goodness, just like the school board does, with the threshold on the assessments.
Use them as the guide. That's our second option.
Yeah.
What do you think, Liz?
I I agree, the second option where we would enter appearance in cases that the school district enters on. I think that one, from the memos and the information that we've collected here, I think that's the best option for us, option 2.
Okay. Catherine, what about you?
Just for clarification, Lauren, you said that if the school district or the school board, if we were in disagreement, we would still be able to go an opposite.
Correct. So that's one of the reasons that the township typically enters its appearance, to make sure that its interests are protected. So that if there is something that the school district would like to do that the township disagrees with, that way the appearance is entered, you're aware of what's happening, and you can make whatever arguments that the township would like to do. If our appearance is not entered, then we're not privy to whatever negotiations or litigation is happening.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I agree with the school, yeah.
Okay, I do as well. I think the second choice is the most prudent one.
Okay, so we will prepare a resolution to that effect for next week. And again, that would require approval from the board next week in order to implement that policy.
Thank you, Lauren.
Okay, and so that will be available for public comment next month on the, or next week on the agenda. Next up is the approval of the Employee Accident and Illness Prevention Program. This is a program recommended by our insurance carrier that we adopt. It's basically a manual. That Employee Accident and Illness Prevention Program outlines the safety and goals of the program are to minimize the frequency and severity of work-related injuries and illnesses. We have a safety committee made up of township staff led by Megan Weaver, and they've reviewed the manual and their suggestions have been incorporated into the document. And so there is no budget impact. It's mainly just sort of a guideline for how we should operate, as townships are not required to follow OSHA regulations. So next week, you guys will be voting on that. Are there any questions? Okay. Unfortunately, Janki Patel has resigned from the Human Relations Commission. So you all will be able to authorize us to start a process to look for a new candidate for the HRC, as well as I think we have 2 vacancies on the UCC Board of Appeals Board. Am I right with 2? Thanks, Deanna. So there's plenty of opportunities to serve. We'll be sending out communications from the township for the way people can apply to serve on those committees. The UCC Board of Appeals does have very specific regulations. If you have an experience as an architect, I think real estate and builders, those are the types of people that by code need to be on that board. Megan, would you like to speak about the leaf and yard waste bid, since it's your project?
Sure. So we had looked into doing this just because we had received a lot of resident feedback that there was interest in having some sort of program where residents could have their leaves collected. So we did look into what other townships were doing. One of the other townships that we really liked the setup of their program was Montgomery Township. So we looked at what they did. And what this advertisement for the bid would be, it would be a 2 times a year pickup. So residents would have their leaves picked up in the fall and then the spring. And then there would be a yard tote dumpster where residents could come here and then drop off their leaves, and all of the leaves would then be taken to an approved facility. This was a need that some of the residents had provided feedback on. So we wanted to explore putting out a bid to see what sort of prices would come in for that service.
Thanks, Megan. And just to point out, one of the things that residents have said they've noticed is that they'll, our trash haulers are required to have leaf collection for recycling, but sometimes we hear that those leaf bags don't go into the recycling truck. And we as the township want to make sure that that leaf waste is actually being recycled. And so this bid would ensure that.
Great.
It would be a collection just for those items. Next up, there's a couple escrow releases actually 3 escrow releases, which I'd like to ask be put on the consent agenda for the next meeting. These releases are when developers are moving for the construction, we let escrow out as they complete parts of the project. All right, I'm going to turn it back to you guys as there's some decision items now. So we're on item 30.
Great. Do we need any clarification about that item? Sandra?
Oh, okay. So this is a motion to approve the agreement with the CoStarz vendor Realty Landscaping Company for the Jacks Lane clearing. I'm very excited that this is going to be happening. We talked about it a lot last year at budget time. And actually, we're able to find a CoStarz vendor, which is great. It takes out the, it's publicly bid through the state purchasing program.
Great. So do we have a motion to approve the agreement with CoStarz vendor Realty Landscaping Company for Jacks Lane clearing in the amount of $89,281.25? We have a motion. Do we have a second?
A second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any board comments?
Yes. Just a little background on this, and Isaac, I'm going to call you into this as well. As a result of those storms that we've been discussing 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we've come to find out that we have property in the township, our property, that has been neglected for a long time. And residents came to us and they told us that when the heavy rains, the creek flooded and trees fell, and it was all on our property. So we decided to ask Isaac to make a list of other areas in the township that have been neglected. And we will be addressing them next couple of years to clean them up. Just like we would, we have rules about your property has to be a certain way, so do ours. So this is the first one, right, Isaac? The Jacks Lane is the first, and then you've identified some other areas as well?
Yeah, we've been working with the Parks and Rec Department. There's different factors that affect those open spaces. The ash tree issue is a big one. And that's something that's hard to, if you have a bunch of those in an area, trying to keep up with that and make sure that, dead trees are removed and that kind of thing. And then access and accessibility to the different areas. Some of them in years past had a certain path in for cleanup, and that's changed over time. So we're working with the Parks and Rec Department to just identify some areas that definitely need some cleanup, and Jacks Lane is the first big one that we're excited to address with the Parks and Rec.
I know residents reached out to me, and I went out to Ivy Lane over that area off of Hancock. And they too, we found some areas there of our property that we'll be looking into. So telling us these issues that you have, that you see that you have, we're going to come out, we're going to be responsive, we're going to look into them and see what we can do to help. And this is just another example of, residents reaching out and us being able to assist them. So I was at the Park and Rec meeting the other night where this was all talked about. So I thought this was really great that we're able to get that area, start with Jackson, get that cleaned up. And I know the residents in that area are too. So thank you.
Do we have any public comments? Deanna, will you do the roll call?
President McNaney? Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me. President Hall?
Aye.
Vice President Carter?
Aye.
Commissioner McNaney?
Aye.
Commissioner Similaro?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
No one even mentioned that it was under budget, but it was under budget, so that's exciting.
Woohoo.
Okay.
Next one is pretty self-explanatory. Did you want to say anything about it, Sandra?
No, we're good.
All right, so do we have a motion to approve the contract with Merck for using their facility for carnival parking on September 9th and 10th? Do we have a motion? Do we have a second?
A second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any board comments? Do we have any public comments? Deanna, will you do the roll call? Is that not a roll call? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Next up is a request to authorize advertising for the snowplow bid. I hate to talk about snow in August, but we do need to be prepared. So we will be asking for that approval next week. It's a regular, every year sort of thing. Item 33 is approval to change the Park and Rec software from Community Pass to RecDesk. that's a hard one, rec desk in 2023. Upper Gwynedd has been using Community Pass for about 7 years now. There's been some issues with it for ease of use for residents signing up for programs as well in the back end for our Park and Rec staff. The support staff and training just isn't working for us. We've given it a good 3-year effort with our new Park and Rec director, and she is looking to move on. So one of the issues is like adding pavilion rentals. We're not able to add that to the software. We can't allow people to buy discount tickets online. We think those sorts of things would really bring additional services to the community.
And they charge you.
What?
And they charge you a
Yes, and we will be eradicating the 3% credit card payment for customers, which I think is a source of frustration for many
it was.
residents, not
Yes,
just
it was.
Commissioner Carter. This is sort of the wave of the future. Municipalities, I mean, it's not even the wave of the future. It's happening all over where the wave came and went, and we're going to go on the wave now.
Yes.
It's like a little tiny blip, but we will be increasing the program costs from like $1 to $3 to cover that credit card fee. So the budget impact is we now pay about $4,500 for our rec program. That would be going up to $5,500 in 2023. With this new program, we would be paying $6,300 and 2 one-time fees to complete the upgrade. So it is slightly more expensive, but it does have additional user capabilities. And it will also, this is cool, use GIS tracking to recognize if someone's a resident or non-resident. We just don't have to rely on them clicking if it's a resident or non-resident. So for 2022, we would need to pay a deposit to get started. Sarah met with Nate, who's also our IT director. I just made that up in his title, but he is our IT guru and phones. He knows a lot of stuff. And I think we can totally absorb the $1,000 into the existing Park and Rec budget, especially since we just heard that they're 58% over on their revenues, which is good. But there's it's money that will come from the budget. We will not be over budget for this. So that is the approval Sarah will be looking for next week. Any questions? Does anyone hear that? Yeah, okay. There's like a weird beeping behind us. There's an approval for a Home at Last 5K race. This is an annual item as well. And we are also looking for approval of the trail license agreement with PICO for the Powerline Trail. This agreement is basically the easement agreement that PICO will be saying you officially have the easement to build the Powerline Trail in the future for the entire length of the trail. So that's going to be an exciting item. It does encumber the township to several things, such as like the way that we will have to, keep track of the trails. We have to not put up metal signs in the areas, and there is a cost associated, a $750 annual cost. And that is the cost of doing business if we want to build a trail on the PICO right of way. Another exciting item, we're looking for approval. Oh, okay. Thanks. No, I can't. It's like cell phone in theirs. Okay, well, they can always contact us tomorrow, or if it's, I'm about to ask the board to vote on the next item, number 36, but hopefully, just a reminder, they have to push *6, right, to unmute? Okay. All right. Item 36 is approval of the purchase order for SWERP pipelining. This is a project that was budgeted. It's coming in at budget. And they are CoStar's vendors, so we are just looking to move forward this large pipelining project that will be in mainly the Villages area of the township. And just a note, this is one of the items that the township looked at utilizing the American Recovery Act funding for at budget time last year.
And we're taking action on that tonight.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Oh, is it not? I'm sorry, is it not decision? Oh, okay, thanks, Deanna. I don't know why I thought.
It wasn't at the top
What
of the
happens
list.
to me after 9 o'clock, I think I saw via roll call vote and thought you had to take action. We're good. You can do it next week. Sorry.
Great.
Then we're actually finished because there's nothing else for me to discuss other than anything you guys might just want to discuss or if there's any questions.
Any questions for Sandra? Thank you, Sandra. Does the board have anything else that they want to share before we adjourn? No? Okay.
I would
Oh,
just
go
like
ahead.
to go back to something that Sandra had said earlier about the National Night Out. I thought this year we did it differently. In the past, we've gone out to neighborhoods that have requested us to come out. And this year, we only went out to, usually we go to 4 neighborhoods, 3 or 4. This year, we went to 2 neighborhoods, and then we brought everything back here to the pavilion. And we had the helicopter landing, and again, I think that Officer Lynch did a fantastic job organizing that. It was a great night. We were there, we saw a lot of pictures were taken, just really a neat event and I hope over the years that it continues to grow. Chief Duffy, did you want to add something?
First, just to echo the praise for Officer Lynch. He really works hard, and we created the position for him as Community Policing Officer 2019, and he's just killed it in that position. He's made it more than we even thought it could be. With National Night Out, you're right. We've always gone to neighborhoods, and the idea that neighbors get out and get to meet each other. So that is kind of hit or miss sometimes. So what we're going to do next year is do the central location, but invite the neighborhood representatives that we have so many contacts with to set up tables with the big sign of what their neighborhood is, with the idea that they can convene and meet each other there. Because we still want to foster that ability for people to get to know each other or see each other they already do and things like that. Because that's the idea of National Night Out. But thank you for your comments.
Thank
That
you.
addition is a great idea.
How do you feel about your major loss in the blood drive?
I already delivered the donuts.
I know.
So, yeah, no, the fire department did an awesome job. We're proud to work with them and proud that we had so much back and forth. I'm not going to say who won the back and forth contest, but they did do a great job with the blood drive. So,
Don't you have to wash vehicles or something?
I think their trucks look great now.
He's really he already delivered the donuts, but I'm not sure that those trucks are ever going to get washed.
There was one more quick thing. During National Night Out, I spoke to a lot of people. I spoke to a lot of residents out in the neighborhoods and that night as well. And what was kind of a common theme was that our fire department are volunteers. And one woman said to me, 2 families that she knows of in the township lost their homes to fire. And our volunteers go out there and they don't even think about it. They just go. That's what they do as volunteers. And today, when I was outside for like 10 seconds because it was too hot, I heard the sirens go off. And I thought, wow, these volunteers in this heat, I think there was a fire yesterday too that I thought this as well. They have to put on all that equipment in this heat and go out there and do what they do. And that's just amazing to me that we have such a strong volunteer fire department that would do that. It's such an unselfish act that they do. And it's just really nice to hear from residents when they said, can we make a donation to them? Of course you can, it's a wonderful thing. So I just would like to give a shout out to them as well, to our fire department and the volunteers, because especially in this heat, they do an amazing job. So we're really lucky to have such a great fire department, and great leadership and everything there. So if they're watching, or Catherine, you could take it back to them.
Absolutely.
That we really appreciate. I'm sure everybody here does what they do.
Absolutely.
And we would never take it for granted what they do. So thank you.
Okay. On that note, thank you all for attending. Have a great evening. Meeting is adjourned.